You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Lan Cao and Harlan Cao on the show with me today. They have a phenomenal new book. It's a joint memoir that is fantastic, and it's called Family in Six Tones, A Refugee Mother, an American Daughter. Welcome to the show, Lan and Harlan.
Hello, Hank. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You're so welcome. Before we jump into the interview, we begin each show with the same question. And Lan, I'll pitch it over to you first. What is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Well, that's very easy for me because when I was a kid, I was absolutely enamored by two huge books in Vietnam. One is 1001 Arabian Nights. I love the idea that there's this woman, Scheherazade, who is saving her own life by telling stories. And I love stories, so I fell in love with that book. And I always thought, wouldn't it be great if I could write stories the way Scheherazade told stories? And then in Vietnam, also there's this very famous Chinese writer who he writes all about martial arts and wushu and swordsmanship. And he has series upon series, and I loved, they were translated into Vietnamese, and I love that too. And I love the idea that, that both series were sagas. And I like the personal stories that are juxtaposed against huge swaths of historical materials. And that's when I wanted to read and to become a writer both.
So there's this there's just something about these huge sagas that when you end one part of the story, there's more to come, and there's something about getting to sink into another world, isn't there?
Yes, there really is. And I like the really detailed look at a small event like a family dynamic, because it's very vibrant, the human relationship. But I also like to situate that against some bigger backdrop. And because my life's been so affected by history, that backdrop has been, bigger events that are beyond my control, like war or the loss of a country. So my exploration has been about the interfacing between the personal realm and that wider historical realm.
Right. Harlan, what about you? What is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I think when I was really little and I always wrote stories, I hated writing in a diary, but I felt like I had a lot to say. So I would always put my life into another person's perspective, like create a character about my own life, which I didn't even know at the time, but that's what my mother had been doing with her own writing, like her novels. So I guess from a young age, when people would ask, like, oh, what do you want to do? I would say, oh, I want to be a writer, but I guess I didn't really know what that meant.
Right.
It's very unexpected that the first thing I would write is a memoir, because it's very, it obviously takes like some creativity, but it really takes more like emotional strength for me than like creative strength, if that makes sense, which is not
Sure.
what I expected at all from writing, especially when I started at like 15.
Right. Harlan, just so the audience knows, you are you beginning college this fall? And I know that was your plan, but with COVID and all that crazy stuff that's happened in 2020, what are you doing presently?
I am supposed to start at UCLA in about a week.
Okay.
The classes
Great.
are online. It's really sad because there was a lot of back and forth between, our kid's going to move in, our kid's not going to move in. And I did end up picking UCLA over a few other schools that I got into, and those schools ended up having the kids move in. So that's a little bit rough, but
Yeah. What are you gonna study? Do you have that worked out yet?
yeah, I'm an economics major, but it's really cool because I didn't even know this. I think I'm used to high school restricting me and saying like these are the classes you have to take. College, I can just pick right now the easiest ones that I want, just while it's online. I want to
Right.
take classes that I don't like math, I don't want to take online, for example. So I'm taking philosophy, political philosophy right now, intro to film, and then this required English class I have to do for writing. Um, but the goal is to study philosophy and business econ.
Well, that's going to be fascinating. Congratulations on starting
Thank
college,
you.
and here's to hopefully 2020 settles down and we can get
I know
to
nothing
some
surprises
semblance
me
of normal
anymore
life.
this year.
Right, right. Um, Lon, you were born in Saigon, Vietnam, and you your accent doesn't betray your heritage much at all. You have how long have you lived in the States?
I've lived in the States for 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't believe it because it really feels like it's much more recent than that. And strangely, even though I've lived in America for so long, it sometimes still astonishes me that my 13 years in Vietnam compared to 45 years, those briefer 13 years continue to exert such a gravitational pull on me.
Um, Lon, you have written a couple of novels before the memoir. What was the impetus for you to begin your writing career? What made you want to become a novelist?
I was a very solitary and lonely kid in high school because I came to this country at age 13 and I was entering high school immediately. So,
Wow.
as a newcomer, I felt very isolated, both just because I'm just brand new and also because I just didn't have the language skills, I didn't have the cultural understanding. So, I was very lonely. And as a result, I was reading a lot of books. Like my parents would bring me to the library on on Saturday and Sunday, starting at 10 when the library is open, and they wouldn't come and pick me up till 5. So I read a lot of books, and I also just wandered the library shelves, and I saw a lot of books on Vietnam. There were tons and tons and tons of huge um, bookcases filled with history on Vietnam, and I noticed that not a single one was written by a Vietnamese. And I thought,
Wow.
well, that is really incredible. I mean, even at age, 14, 15, I thought that was a big gap. And what was more surprising to me was that people didn't notice that that was a gap, that they thought it was just totally normal to have so many books written about Vietnam, the Vietnamese, and the Vietnam War, all by non-Vietnamese. And so I felt like I need to write. And that was like a burning fire. And when I started, so it was just inside me that desire to do something about it. And eventually, when I was graduating from law school, I took the subway to work at my law firm job. And the subway was often stuck, delays and things like that. And I decided while sitting on the subway, all that dead minutes, I would just take out my yellow pad and start writing. So that's how it started.
Lon, you came to the United States, like you said, at the beginning of high school. Harlan, as someone who just finished high school, could you imagine what your mother, must have gone through? It's hard enough starting high school for one, but then to be a recent immigrant to a country where not only do you not know anyone because it's a new school, it's a new country. Did you guys talk about that, Harlan, and from your perspective, how difficult must it have been for your mother?
My mother's very strong, and I think it's very sad for me because I know that if it had just been about moving, she could have adapted. But the problem is that the people who were supposed to welcome her and help her through high school were very racist. They were unkind. Um, and they didn't even care if they appeared that way. That's how bad it was, right? Like, it's not just the kids, but even the teachers who are meant to help you. They say things to her like, well, I'm not going to let people like you succeed in this country. I mean, it's so obvious and so blatant. So even though I can't relate to it because, I'm half, so I've never once had to experience, and I look very white. I've never once had to experience any form of like discrimination or bullying because of something like that. No one's ever tried to set me back. And so I can't empathize, but I can sympathize. And we've always talked about it. I mean, since I was little, we've talked about it because she always wanted me to be a kind person. And the smart thing to do, I guess, as a parent is to share personal stories with your kids so they understand like the impact that words have on people. And I think her exposing me to that made me grow up in a way of I've always kind of like stayed in my own lane. Like people at school, I feel like there's a big culture around gossiping. I mean, even when my mom was in high school till now, especially with technology, I she always shared with me. She always told me, and I can't relate to it, but it definitely changed the way I saw the world. And going into high school, it did make me a little bit afraid. Um, I was always shy anyway. And not like in an antisocial manner, but I just didn't I never tried hard enough to fit in. I think I was pretty like well known, but I don't think I was ever like popular. And a lot of that is because I am scared of like friendships. Um, it's not because I think anything bad will happen to me, but every time I had a problem in high school, I never wanted to really tell my mom about it if it was something social because I didn't want her to think that I was like living what she had gone through at all. I didn't want her to take it that way.
Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experiences. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be a part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques. Learn from a vast collection of free writing resources. Make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one? Join Scribophile today at scribophile.community.
Lon, when you came to the United States, this would have been the mid to late 1970s. Is that right?
Yeah, 75.
Okay, 75. So that was right after the Vietnam War ended, not very long at all. What was it like being a Vietnamese person coming to a country that had kind of such raw emotions around, a war that lasted too long and people were not excited about the outcome and, a lot of very hot emotions around this time. What was it like being an immigrant from that country coming in?
I think that's a very important point you brought up because I think that when we arrived in Vietnam and we were the first wave, and a lot of the first wave ended up in certain places, like outside of Washington, D.C. is a popular destination. I think people felt that it was safe in D.C. because Saigon was the safest place in Vietnam because it was the capital. So maybe we brought that preconception with us. And there were other places, like Orange County, California. So there are certain places that attracted a lot of Vietnamese refugees to choose as their destination. And as a result, I think that the people who were there first, the Americans who were born and who were living there, probably felt like, oh my God, the Vietnam War is coming to our neighborhood or our city. And there are so many, quote, of them coming. and maybe I feel a little bit of a deluge here. So I felt a little bit like some of the people who reacted to that at the very beginning felt themselves under siege, maybe. And we were reminders of a war that they were trying to forget, because it was a contentious war. And then, as you said, the outcome was not as the country wanted. So maybe all of that frustration and pain that the US was already going through was exacerbated by our presence. So I felt like in certain settings, I felt that subliminal and sometimes explicit hostility because of what people assumed about me, not necessarily about me per se, because they didn't really know me. And then there were some people who were very, very nice, like some of our neighbors brought turkeys over to us. So there was a man in the Air Force who we didn't have any rakes at the house, and when it was the fall and all the leaves were falling, he raked the leaves, and then he came over to our house and raked it as well.
Wow. Lon, you have written and published a couple of novels, The Lotus and the Storm, Monkey Bridge. After writing in the fictional world, what was it that motivated you to write a memoir? And whose idea was it first? Was it you, Lon, or was it you, Harlan, that came up with the idea to do this joint memoir? Or was it something that you guys had talked about and just, this was the time to do it? What was the genesis for this book?
Harlan, why don't you talk about it?
The publishing house actually came to us and offered like a deal because they had heard an NPR interview that we recorded when I was 12. Actually, it was for StoryCorps, and it was just supposed to be like in the archives online. And it was in this format of, I would ask my mom questions about Vietnam, and at the time I hadn't experienced much yet, so it was mostly centered around the war, and it was formatted to show different generations and the effect trauma had on them. And then when I was 15, that was the anniversary of the 40th anniversary of the Tet
50th.
Offensive. 50th
50th.
of the Tet Offensive. So pulled it out of the archives and played a little snippet of it on the radio, and somebody at Penguin heard it, and they contacted my mom and they said, if Harlan can provide us a writing sample, so that was like the first little bit of pressure I had, then we will take it would be cool, because by the time they offered it to me, then we could talk about not only the war but also how like the war affected my mom, how that affected her parenting, how that parenting affected my life, and how like that affected my relationships. Like I guess it's to show like a domino effect.
Sure.
So it's like coming of age, yeah, that's.
So one thing that's fascinating about memoirs is that usually the focus of the book is on a particular time period or a particular event structure, and which can be very different from like an autobiography, which tends to be more of a beginning to end sweeping sort of narrative. How did you guys decide what that window into your lives would be, where the beginning would be, where the ending, and what you were going to focus on?
Well, obviously it's harder for my mom because everything that I write about my life has always been while she exists.
Right, of course.
So I could talk about it chronologically, basically, where she has to jump around and talk about like before Harlan, after Harlan, before the war, after the war. So we kind of came up with it by ourselves. I mean, obviously the editors had this idea of like, okay, Harlan's gonna probably go chronologically. And the most confusing part was when my mom had to somehow respond to what I'm saying, fitting into her own life but still being able to talk about like college, for example. So that was. What about mom? What happened with your writing process?
Well, I think that we were also supposed to be writing around certain themes. So it's not autobiographical in the sense that, you know, everything that happened is going to be described. It's not chronological in the sense that everything that happened during that chronology would be in. So because the genesis was StoryCorps interview, which centered around war and the process of leaving a country and entering into another one, and whether to assimilate or how to assimilate. So those were the themes, right? So we talked about things that happened that fit in with that particular theme, and then it would jump into the next generation. So Harlan would then talk about it from her point of view. But you're right that it's not autobiographical in the sense of everything that happened. And the theme was dictated by the revolutions within StoryCorps.
The title of the book is very evocative, Family in Six Tones. What does this reference, and what do the nuances of the Vietnamese language, because this is a reference to the six tones of language. First off, for our audience that are mainly English speakers, what are the six tones? What does this refer to, and what does this title evoke?
So the alphabet is for Vietnamese, it's the same. It's like A, B, C, D. There, each letter might be pronounced differently. Like the D is pronounced like a Y or a Z or stuff like that when you read it out loud. But there's also markings that come that cause like a change in the way that you say the word, the way that you pronounce that one letter, and that totally changes the meaning of the word. So obviously, like to Vietnam, but at the same time, it's also just about like like how fragile the language is, and it's a reference to how fragile our relationship is, the mother-daughter relationship, or the refugees' relationship to their world, or how fragile the relationship between myself and my years in high school, stuff like that. It could be anything. It's all about just all the possible tones and windows.
There's an interesting thing about the relationship, the parent-child relationship, um, in that when you're younger and you look to your parents, you see them in a certain light, in like they're nearly invincible, and they're these kind of larger than life characters, and nothing bad happens to them, and they just have everything under control. And then as you grow and you age and you mature, you then see your parents in a more human light, and then that can change you as you kind of understand what they are going through. Harlan, what was it like to see your mother's humanity as you got older and closer to her, and then your relationship with your mother changed? And were there any stories that you guys shared in the writing of this book that maybe you didn't know about earlier, and was able to get a clearer understanding of your mother and what her life's experiences have been?
Yeah, the thing about the way she parents that's unique is she loves to expose me to things, and that includes herself. A lot of the time, though, it wasn't her choice, because there are things in the book that talk about like symptoms of severe trauma and like mental health. So those things are things that I saw from a very young age. So honestly, as I'm writing the book, it wasn't as if we were like researching each other and like checking up on things as we wrote. I think both a good thing and a bad thing. But I knew a lot of the stuff already that I had written. Most of the conflict in the book did not come from learning new things about each other. It came more from like deciding what to put in there and what to allow people to see. It's good though, because even though I think I learned, I guess the humanity part of my mother that you were talking about, the vulnerable part, I learned about it very young. So when I'm supposed to kind of be, I guess, like childhood innocence and stuff, I already know about that, which is good and bad, but it it definitely motivated me to write the book because I've always wanted to talk about in my own way, like mental health problems and relationships and how it affects relationships and what's normal and like what's not normal and is there even such thing as a normal. And so her exposing me to herself was beneficial, right? What do you think, Mom?
Yeah.
So Lon, you deal in the book with a lot of issues that you've dealt with childhood trauma and your reaction and response to those. Um, what was it like to talk about those things in light of your daughter's experience also? Sometimes our relationship with our children or with our parents, um, can almost feel like certain topics are taboo or off the table. Um, because there are certain boundaries that we put there. But in a book like this, you're very open and honest. Was it difficult, kind of treading these waters alongside your daughter?
Own self and my own experience in high school as a mirror, look for whether or not there was trouble. So, for example, I had no friends in high school. And so I thought, well, she has friends. She has a lot of friends. And so that meant she is stylish. So none of the things that I experienced. So in some ways, that is the part that I discovered.
And we had to get a mediator,
Our editors were
the
mediator,
agent.
Ellen, my agent, and that helped because we trusted them and they were also out of the dynamic.
Harlan, you recently lost your father, and I'm sorry to hear that, and our condolences are with you. This book focuses mostly on your relationship with your mother. How was your relationship with your father, and how does the relationship with him play into the book that we have now?
I think from the time I was a baby, I always really worshipped my dad. And it's possible that I still like obviously not the present parent. So that's pretty common. Like kids will often like assign like the best traits to the parent that isn't there. Um, but I know for a fact, like first of all, he knew that he was a lot older than my mom, so I think he had a sense just from basic math that he's probably not going to make it past college even for me. So he never, he always wanted me to think of him as the hero. It was always, yeah, whatever you want, yes, yes, yes. And I knew that wasn't his natural parenting style because he had three other kids from a previous marriage who were grown up and they had a completely opposite understanding of how he parented. So it was clear he purposely made himself more like a grandfather for me. Um, and it's hard because there were a lot of things I didn't know about him. And I don't talk about it in the book my mother and I decided not to, and there's other stuff. It would open up a bridge to other things that we weren't ready to talk about.
Sure.
But it caused a lot of problems for me when he died, not only like obviously from losing him, but you know, I hadn't spent as much time with him as I wanted to because I had a totally different understanding of what had happened. Everything happened when I was really young, and I felt so many things. Like I felt jealousy toward my half siblings because they had experienced him more like at the height of his career when he was able to fully parent. Um, he he was really cool. I mean, he was a law professor. He was always speaking on big issues with constitutional law. He was very respected, but he always said to my mom, like, you have to break at least one law a day because, like, a small one, not like, so if the Nazis come, you don't just follow them and you have free thought. And you can tell from like how he parented, like he was very into like, oh, the gray area, like, this is he was a perfect match for my mother. It's so funny though because I see her as such an independent person, like such an independent woman, you know. So it's hard for me to even remember what it was like when I saw her married to my dad, even though it wasn't that long ago at all. But the part where he was able to function fully as a parent was only between the ages where I was like 1 until probably like 10. And that was that. So that it's very hard for me to accept.
The new book is called Family in Six Tones: A Refugee Mother, an American Daughter. Now that the book is out there and available for everyone, does this open the doors for more things? Lon, I know that you have a couple of books out previous to this one. And Harlan, I know you're starting college, but what doors does this new book open for you?
I'm trying to write a novel right now that's less obviously difficult. Still kind of based on my life, but maybe something that I can like maybe adapt into like a screenplay or something, because that's what I really want to do is make movies. And I think my mom, you're working on some short stories.
I've been working on it for a long time, but I set aside to do this memoir. So I'm on sabbatical from my law teaching, and I'm doing. But I'm also working. I will be returning to my collection of short stories as soon as I feel the inspiration.
Love it. Well, we're going to put links to the book in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for people to find it and go buy it. Lan, Harlan, if people want to dig into all the great stuff that you guys are doing, is there a website where they can connect with you and dig into all that great stuff?
Is LANCAO
And then mine, just my name, harlanvancao.com.
Excellent. And we're going to send everyone to see you and to pick up a copy of the book. Lan and Harlan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
you so much.
World Anvil is a browser-based world-building platform designed for all world builders, writers and novelists, dungeon masters, game developers, and everyone else. World Anvil keeps your world setting safe and organized, helps you find your characters, locations, plots, timelines, and maps quickly and easily as you write. Then, if you choose, you can showcase your amazing world building to the world, beautifully and interactively, to keep your readers engaged. You can even use our professional tier to build your career selling access to behind-the-scenes content your readers will love and growing your community. Build your world setting in any genre with over 25 custom-built world-building templates, complete with prompts to inspire your creativity. Allow your readers to explore the public parts of your world in an innovative new way with interactive maps, timelines, and wiki-style articles. Give special access to co-authors, beta readers, customers, or patrons to see exclusive behind-the-scenes content. There's a free version to get started with all of the major features. Guild membership offers you a host of extra options, including comprehensive privacy settings, co-authors, presentation options, and so much more. Join our community of over 800,000 world builders, including professional authors. Take part in competitions and learn more about world building at this fantastic online community. Use the coupon code HANK to get 20% off all 6 and 12-month subscriptions. WorldAnvil.com. I'm a recent convert and I know you will be too.